everybody. Good morning. How are we doing? Good. It sounds like you all have mouths full of either bacon or scrambled eggs. Hey, everybody, how are you doing this morning? Okay, there we are. Good. Well, hey, my name is JC Leopoldo. I will be your co-host this morning as we spend some time in discussion, learning from one another, and getting to hear Paul and Adrienne talk about leadership. If this is your first time at the Good Leadership Breakfast, this will be a first time through this exercise. Has anyone been here this whole series, the last 3 months? Has anyone been here March and April and May? Awesome. Well, you're going to get to do this exercise for the third month in a row, and I'd love to know afterwards what doing this exercise has made you think about, is what made you aware of. So, the 7 F's. If you look at the notepad on your table, take out your cell phone and take a little picture of that QR code that says 7 F's wheel. It'll pull up this exercise. The 7 F's is a scorecard for us personally and a great way to strengthen relationships, build trust, and embrace healthy tension professionally or with anyone that we ever share space with. So when you pull up that exercise on your phone, what you're going to see is faith, family, finances, fitness, friends, fun, and future. And then your opportunity to rank these things, 1 being that they could not be any worse in your life, or 10, they could not be any better. Take this time right now to go ahead for about the next minute and consider where you're at in your life today, this morning, this Friday, in this ballroom. How are you doing? So we believe that people can grow in their 7 F's as much at work as they can at home. And that's kind of a radical thought, right? How often maybe is the perception that we have to check ourselves at the door of work and we get to go back to that afterwards? With all of the change that's going on in the professional world, right? People are looking for spaces where they see that the 7 F's continue to matter and continue to affect bottom lines and the progression of vision and goal within our workplaces. So, save today's results. Now it is time to toss it over to the founder and creator of the Good Leadership Breakfast, a thought leader in the executive coaching industry whose firm, Good Leadership, is creating the category of executive team coaching, Paul Botts. Hey, Paul, how's it going?
It's going great.
We've all decided we love the green coat today. Happy spring.
Yeah. Everybody from Ryan Construction and Irish Titan wants my jacket. Yeah, It's springtime in here for sure. I want to talk about a subject today about missional leadership. Missional leadership and missional leaders. What's so funny about that concept is that often you hear this phrase like, well, she's on a mission, or there goes a man on a mission. And it's not always positive. Sometimes it means, well, you know, there's somebody who's really artsy or unfocused, or they don't really know what they're doing, or maybe even they're in it for themselves. But I've come to the conclusion that through hosting 85 speakers for the Good Leadership Breakfast over the years, that good leaders are actually missional leaders. In my mind, what that means is that we can keep people focused, people who have multiple interests, we can keep them focused on the mission. I like to think of myself as a missional leader. Everything we do here is aimed at this idea that goodness pays. So what I think is really interesting to support this theory is last month we had Natalie Studi here on the stage. She was a remarkable presence, and we did some research in the room and we learned about her success habits, and she said there were 3 things that they keep focused on to manage the 17,000 employees in their organization that manages healthcare planning in all 50 states in the United States. She said they try to provide 3 things to all their people. They want to make sure everyone has meaningful work. Second, that they have colleagues they're connected to that they respect and admire. And then third, that everybody is making progress towards their aspirations. I think missional leaders do that. They make those connections. I also think, we've proven it. My friend Paul Hillen is in the room. He and I did this project together. We researched goodness in business and wrote this book called How Goodness Pays. And what was fascinating about that research is 2 things. We identified what the definition of goodness is that you can talk about in someplace other than church. And the definition is when people thrive together in a culture of encouragement, accountability, and positive teamwork. And it's those words, thrive together, that we think are really interesting, and it was mentioned here by Colleen. So in that research, we identified 5 things, and I think it's going to be relevant to the conversation that are coming soon with Adrienne. So the 5 things that we learned that good leaders who's leading with goodness makes it pay financially, those 5 things are, number 1, the organization has a compelling plan. We heard about that here, about TCO. Second thing is they're leading in such a way that profitability is healthy for everyone in the business. They have a team-based culture, that's the thrive together thing. Leaders are timely and transparent in how they make decisions. And then they behave in such a way that their ethics are magnetic to the best talent. You look at that list, I think it takes a missional leader to pull that off. And the most important thing statistically on that list of 5 is the compelling plan. And so when you have a compelling plan, it means that you can focus and communicate to people, here are the top 3 priorities for this year. And in the context of that, people understand, where do I fit? Why do I matter? And how do we thrive together? These ideas are what we're lifting up on a regular basis to help organizations like TCO and speakers like Adrienne really focus themselves so they can get the best out of the energy that they put into their work. It's meaningful stuff. I love it. And I'm super excited that you're here to share it with us today. Now, the pandemic taught us how to act a little differently at Good Leadership, and it taught us how we can use technology to do research. We started doing it over the Zoom when we were broadcasting the breakfast. You're helping us today in the room. And now's when I want to introduce my colleague, Kelsey. Kelsey's one of the coaches we have at Good Leadership. We're up to 20 now. Kelsey lives here in Minneapolis, St. Paul. Her husband works at U.S. Bank. She has 2 awesome little boys. Kelsey and I work together on clients in business and in healthcare and in sports and entertainment. So let's welcome Kelsey to the breakfast.
Thanks, Paul.
So what do you have for us today?
Yeah, it's great to be here. So I have the fun role of getting to engage all of you. We will continue with these polls and get to hear from you around priorities specifically. Mm-hmm. So our first poll question, let me actually back up. The other great thing about this is we get to hear from you in the room, but we'll also get to hear from people prior to this breakfast. So we polled people who on paper look like the people in this room, but who haven't self-selected into a Good Leadership breakfast. And what we found with that is that there's often some interesting discrepancies in the data we get. Mm-hmm. So with that, our first question is this. How many priorities has your organization's team at the top set or articulated for the organization? So we don't have priorities, 1 to 3, 3 to 5, 5 to 7, or too many to remember. Okay, so let's see. We have 3% of the room saying we don't have priorities, and I'm going to jump down to the bottom, 6% with too many to remember, because kind of the same boat there, right? A good majority with 3 to 5 priorities. So I know, Paul, we kind of gave away our point of view on how many priorities are useful. Yep. I'm going to compare this data now to what we collected in advance because there's some interesting differences, right? So the biggest things that jump out to me is how many more people in this pre-poll data would answer this top one. We don't have priorities. We were at 3% for the room, 10% here, and too many to remember at 18%. You can see again that difference, though I think compared to the room we had more with 1 to 3, so that's an interesting note as well. When I was thinking about this pre-poll data, Paul, for me, it was interesting to just recognize, for the most part, people, there's a lot of priorities going on is what we're seeing.
Yeah, not only that, but 28% total, too many to remember or none at all. I mean, I don't know how you keep the Thrive Together concept alive if that's the way it is in your organization.
Yeah, that's right.
What's next?
Yeah. So next we have, how effectively does your organization's team at the top communicate about these priorities? So we've got everything from effectively down to, I don't know the priorities. So text in your responses, please. Let's get our polling music. Looks like we're at a good spot with the poll. So it looks like in this room, we're getting close to half of people would say that their team at the top is effectively communicating their priorities. And with somewhat effectively, clearly close behind. So I think that's interesting. If we flip to what we collected in advance, you'll see those first two numbers kind of flip. So we've got higher and somewhat effectively versus effectively, but pretty similar for the last two. And as I was thinking about this, Paul, it's interesting. You know, there's a lot of priorities, or so many that we can't remember, but that people are getting credit for at least communicating what's important. So there's this kind of tension between those two ideas.
Yeah, this tracks with the other data that we've been following. Actually, internal communication in organizations has gone up since COVID. I think part of it is that we're relying on less channels to get the information because of the way COVID forced us to work. But, you know, it's been kind of an epidemic in the past where the employees complaining that the communication is awful. We've actually seen it go up a lot during COVID. So that's just another example of how things could get better.
Yeah, yeah, great point. And the last question that we asked is about actually how likely you think the priorities are to be executed. So again, we'll go from very confident down to I don't know. Benny, polling music, please. So we are pretty confident to very confident in this room that priorities that we have that are set by the team at the top will get done. Somewhat confident we're at 25%, and it looks like I don't know is not high enough to be measurable. So that is good news, because if we flip to the next slide, actually, the I don't know from the prior group was at 8%. So this group at least feels like we know what's going on and we have a good sense of what's actually happening. You know, when I was looking at this data, my thought around this is there's this sense of there are so many priorities and we know what they are and we just have to get them done. So the question that comes to mind for me is what we talk about, at what cost?
Yeah, and confusion has high cost in organizations, but I look at the data and I'm really pleased. I mean, the people in this room feel well led compared to the general population, and you know, that's great. You're investing in yourself, you believe in this stuff, but just remember that as context, that when you go back, it might not be the same. So thank you very much. Let's give it up for Kelsey here. So what I take from that at the aggregate level is good leaders, missional leaders, need to know how to keep people focused on the main thing. And that's one of the reasons why I'm so excited to introduce you to our speaker today. I've known Adrienne for 25 years. She's one of these missional leaders who's been guiding her organization for about 3 decades. She and I first met when we were young people. We were trying to carve our path. I was working at a big PR firm in town, Padilla, Spear, Beardsley, and one of our clients was trying to establish a foundation where they were investing in particularly organizations that help kids in school. And that led us to a path where we chose 3 organizations, and the number one organization we invested in was the organization that Adrienne founded. And so what's been interesting is we've been watching each other for 25 years, and she's been at this breakfast dozens of times. So what I see is an effective missional leader who's really, really good at team leadership. They focused in ways that were amazing during COVID, and then you're going to hear about it, the Minneapolis teachers strike. And they came out of it in a much, much better place. I've always admired her passion, but also how she's able to organize people to go towards that passion together. So please welcome one of my favorite people on the planet, Adrienne Diercks. Yeah, welcome. So here's what I remind you that if you have any questions, you can text them in to that 22333 thing. We are going to do a table discussion and also collect questions from the audience. Kelsey will bring those back when we're done here. So Adrienne, we've known each other for a long, long time.
Many years.
Yep. So would you tell us what your journey has been? Where did you start? What were some of the key points to get to where you're at today?
Well, born and raised in Minneapolis. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you, Paul. Thank you all for being here. Born and raised in Minneapolis, went all through the Minneapolis public schools, raised by a single mom of 4 of us. And I always think when you ask me that question, when we were little, it was the 70s, she said, kids. She said, I'm not going to be able to maybe pay for your college. She's an actor still today, and she said, do what you love, make a difference, and I'll support you best I can. So that was a big piece of my journey because I took that very literally and kept thinking about through school, through college, through middle and high school, what do I really want to do? What am I supposed to do? And put myself through school and through a series of events, was really inspired that with this question of what if every young person from an early age asked themselves, who am I? What's out there in the world, and what do I want to do in that world? And was fortunate enough to have that idea and go with it, and that was 28 years ago. And people say, would you ever think you're here today having worked with over 200,000 students and their families? Some are here today. To have that privilege and to be doing this work, never.
Well, I know there have been things along the way you didn't see coming that we call those pivot points, where you
Every day.
Yeah, start somewhere and then end up some. That's how we met. This organization you'd never even heard of came in and said, we want to invest in you. What were some of those key pivot points over the last couple of decades that really shaped who you are now?
Well, there are a couple key pivot points. I mean, one, we joke at the office because we talk about the pyramids and where Project Success was born. After college, when I had no idea what I wanted to do and had taken out loans to go through school and knew those loans were coming up, that year before I graduated college, I said, what if I could just dream about anything I could do? Well, if I could do anything, I would travel. And my mom said, I support you emotionally in that. And I said, I think I understand what you're saying. And so I went to different people and I learned how could I travel. And I worked extra hours in accounting. And I ended up traveling. And after a year of going places by myself, I ended up in Cairo. And I was like, you can rent a camel. And I went through the pyramids. This is a true story. And on that day, I was like, I'm in the pyramids on a camel. And I had no money and no idea how to travel. But I had a lot of opportunities and support and people that said, here's a little bridge to what you can do. And Project Success was born there because I went, yeah, what if everyone had support? Everybody had a bridge. Everyone was able to dream early on. What would that do? That was pivotal. A couple other things as throughout the career, when you asked me that, Paul, I thought about several things. When I started a pilot program at North High School, one of these pivotal moments is we did this huge event at the Guthrie Theater, and Cheryl Creasy was the principal of Ann Watton, and she said, we need you at Ann Watton. And I was like, oh, this isn't, I'm just starting, I don't have money or staff. She said, I'll see you Monday. And that was a pivotal moment because another school wanted this program. And I had many moments like meeting you in Life Touch. I was 25, and you all heard the story, and as you just said, you said yes. And I was like, wow. And dreams were born that day and launched that day, and there's been so many pivotal moments. And you never know what they're gonna look like and what they're gonna be. But even recently, we've had two where, people say you've been in this work, you've been doing this job 28 years. I said, I have had 14 jobs in 28 years. But in the last few years, when you asked me that question, one was, we brought over 5,000 young people to Hamilton. And
amazing, isn't it? Yeah, absolutely.
And it was a highlight of I think many of our careers, because people were like, yeah, it's theater, it's inspiring. You know how much we need inspiration? And Hamilton was the biggest thing, and we brought 5,000 students, more than any other community in the US. That was a moment. And the last thing I'll say is this other moment is several years ago when we were listening to young people of, yes, we're doing these things well, but what are we doing today? What do we need to keep doing? And we launched our Project Success Institute. So there's been, and it's so successful today, and it's only the beginning. So really, I love looking at those moments because they keep you going when you're in a moment of like, what just happened today?
Let's go back to the theater thing.
Yeah.
That's where you started. Why did you choose theater, and why does theater work so well?
Well, I grew up in the theater. My mom, as I said, actor her whole life, and did what she loved and raised 4 kids. So I grew up in the theater, and I think about a moment in 8th grade. Some of you may have heard of the Cricket Theater, and we didn't always have childcare, and we did a lot of ushering. And my mom was in a play by Carol Churchill called Cloud 9. And middle school, struggling anyway, because it's middle school. I thought I looked good, I didn't. Very bad hair. But lots of challenges, and I'd go to see this play, and it changed me. I cried, I laughed. There's a song at the end that says, "It'll be fine when you reach Cloud 9." And something in that, I went to see it 8 times, because it made me feel alive and good and sad, and it's magic. And so when this mission came to be, which was not about theater or art, the mission was about inspiring young people to dream about their future. How do you take steps to get there, and how do you gain the tools for the rest of your life? Well, I'm going to say one other thing, Paul. You don't invite people to a goal-setting workshop. You invite them to the theater. And you say, we want to get to know you and your family, and we're going to experience it together, and we're going to talk about it, and then we're going to do some work on your goals. It's been magic.
Well, it's clear the world needs nonprofit leaders like you to succeed. There's no question about that. Help us understand what a day in the life looks like for these middle school students. So your programs impact every middle school student in the city of Minneapolis.
And high school.
And high school, okay. So what's a day in the life look like for these students?
Well, here's what I would say. I would say that I don't know that. And I always say that every student is completely unique and has everything they need inside them. What I will say to that question is that what we've learned is a day in the life is always different. As students have their hopes, their challenges. What I learned, Paul, from that was when we get, which now we get every day, a letter, a call. Some of you came up to me today and told me about the experience of your young people. What I would say is, every student, whatever their challenges, whatever they're going through, which today are many, but there's also so much hope that they want opportunities, connection, so they get to experience in their own unique way who they are, what they want to do, so they can make a plan for their lives.
So can you list off just a few of the other, taking people mostly to their first theater experience is one of the ways you do. What are some of the other things you do?
So since then, we have 4 different buckets, but we have 9 programs. And some people say that's so much, but it's to reach our one goal. So we do outdoor adventures. We're going to Beartooth National Park, the Apostle Islands, for students with all abilities. We're bringing hundreds of kids to the Boundary Waters. If you want to come, you'll never forget it. Call me. We do global experiences. We are in every classroom for every 6th through 12th grader in Minneapolis right now, every month, with young, inspirational leaders and mentors that work with our students over years to ask those important questions about who they are. We do incredible college tours. We do career tours. We do musicals, which are, as many people say, better than Broadway. But the reason for those musicals is, again, it's an experience, Paul, that is 9 weeks of hard work, connecting with your peers, getting up there and performing, learning how to succeed and fail. That teaches you things you can never forget. And then we've added our institute, which is now we have 4 certificate programs in coding, in cooking and wellness, our most popular one, in financial health, and in art. And we also have one led by an alumni in bike repair. So it's many programs, but what I love is we meet students where they are. So some students go to every college tour and never go to a play. And some people go to all the theater. And the most important thing is it's all of these 9 programs over time. We are not all the same people we were yesterday or 5 years ago. So I think one of the greatest gifts to our work, and I know I've had this, is getting to know students and families over time and building on all the work we do together through these 9 programs. It's magic.
Let's talk about the business of project success. You've been doing this for almost 30 years. You know a little bit about taking a startup idea and turning it into a thriving, mature organization. What are a couple of pieces of advice you could give to anybody in the room who's thinking about maybe starting something?
I'll say what I've learned is it is what you've talked about. For us, it is about focus. It's easy to say I'm going to focus on my mission and keep your eye on the prize. But you have to do it and then use your values as your guide. We have our first value is kids first, is students first. It's easy on paper. Every day we use that as a guide for our decisions and how we spend our time and our resources. The advice is focus. And then do what you do really well. And then when it needs to change, be swift to change it. I haven't always done that. But we talked about this today, the older I get, the more we do it, the easier that gets. When we had the idea for the Institute, we rented the space and we didn't know what it was going to be, but we just did it. And then it took a year to get that into place. But I think it's about, and focus is an action every day. And today more than ever, that's, I think, the skill. A lot of my wonderful team, our team is here. And what is the priority today? And whatever we're going to do it really, really well. And the other thing I would say is relationships. So if you value the people that you work with that have helped you over all these years, that you go back and help them, and you build and you help each other, those relationships, when COVID hit, when we had the incredible challenges in our community, we went to all of our partners in our relationships and said, what are we going to do to keep going and not skip a beat? It made all the difference.
Yeah, many organizations got better during COVID, but we were all forced to focus.
That's right.
Well, one of the things that we do for all these speakers is we give them the gift of helping them understand what some of their success habits are. At Good Leadership, we have this idea that the highest performing teams exist on this concept called epoxy theory. And epoxy are 2 chemicals that do nothing until you put them together. And one chemical is the idea of relationship capital, which you just talked about. Yeah. And then the other idea is structural integrity. We believe that leaders walk into their team leadership one of those 2 things. And so we interviewed some of the people who report to you, and they told us very clearly that you are a relational leader, that you walk in thinking about how people are doing and, thinking about their well-being and the relationship side of things. But you also have some really powerful success habits. And so the first success habit lines up exactly with the goodness definition, that you create a culture of encouragement. So why is that important to you, and how do you do it?
It's important because, 1, we all need it, and 2, every day, beginning when I started working with students, you see the results of it every day. And the opposite is not good. And it doesn't mean, I always say this, it's not strawberry shortcake encouragement. You may not remember her. It's real encouragement. It's critical. And it's what we all need in different amounts at different times. And how do I do it? I think it's through love and through kindness and through listening. And the word, I guess, empathy is I really think about often just how are people feeling and how are they doing and how would I feel in that moment, and wanting to make sure as a leader when you miss that, it's not good. It doesn't feel good to the person. So really thinking about how's their day going. It's raining and we have 200 students out on the river today. I'm thinking about Jenny and that program and how that day's going.
So the second success habit is that you ensure everyone has a personal connection to the mission. We talked about that from the research last month. So why is that important to you and how do you do it?
It's important to me because one, it is important to me. Like, it is why I'm here every day. If I don't know, because I'm not with students every day like I used to be, and there are things in my job that I don't love doing, although what I love about all of the tasks is what it's leading, that if I do this well, if I order everyone a really good laptop and get a really good deal, they're happier and we're gonna do better. I get a lot of satisfaction out of that. But why it's important is, one, you talked about that with the survey, if we don't know what our why is, we're not gonna be doing good work. But secondly, this is about young people. We don't make widgets, as we say sometimes. We are working with kids, and it has to be the best, and it has to be authentic. And if it isn't, it's no good. You can't do it because it's a young person's life.
The third success habit we heard about is outside the genre of the first two, and that is that you have an intentional cause and effect when you do your change management. I thought that was really insightful that people would use those words. They probably got them from you. So what is it? How do you do it, and why is it important?
Well, we all know change can be hard and fun, and it's necessary. I think I work with some great people where we balance each other out quite well. I love that human side of change management or dealing with change, which is how do you communicate about it first, listen, and really get a sense. You don't just make a decision. We all see when things look good on paper, but they're really not good changes, and they also haven't been not only communicated about, but the person making the change has not done their research. So I think it's critical, and that's how I appreciate it. Someone said to me once, early on about board meetings, all the work is before the board meeting. There should never be a surprise to anyone in that room. And early on with students, I'll just say, for example, way a long time ago when we were using theater, we brought literally 3,000 students to Noise Funk. This was in the 90s. And the North High and Franklin Middle School were so excited to do it. And they said, great, we'll do it. And I said, well, let's do an auditorium where we tell all the students what they're doing, what to expect, what's for lunch. And they're like, they don't need that. And I said, I know they're 11, 12, and 13, but what if they could really prep for the day? And they were like, okay, you got 10 minutes. This is a microcosm of change management and communication. I remember I said, you're gonna get on the bus, here's what we expect, here's the show, you guys are gonna be amazing, encouragement. And then I told them about the Subway lunch at the park. Every question, about 100 of them were about lunch, but they knew what was gonna happen in that day. And they said there's never been a better field trip or experience.
Intentional change management. Okay, so here's what I'm going to throw it back to Kelsey. We love doing these table discussions, and let's put these success habits back up on the screen here. And Kelsey, I'll throw it to you.
Yeah, so we wanted to give you the opportunity to have one more table discussion to really take in what we've been talking about. So the question to your tables, I'll ask you to kind of divide in half so you can have a bit more of an intimate conversation. But it would be, when you think about those success habits, which one or two can you start applying, and how in your current life and leadership? Sounds like it was enriching discussion. I hate having to pull everyone out of it, but we want to get to hear a little bit more from Adrienne before we head out.
Yeah, so you collected some questions.
That's right.
From the audience, so here we go.
So I get to ask you a couple questions from the audience. So the first one is this: how do you get others on board with your mission?
They get to meet, they come to Project Success. We had people yesterday. They see the space, they meet our team, and they meet our students. And honestly, they're on board. It really is true. It's because there's the action, and there's some people say, you've done this for so long, we have a track record, but we keep innovating. But it's the students, the families, talking about the mission, and there's 40 people just like me at Project Success, many who are alumni, who say, this is so important, and they have the passion, that's how we do it. And I'll say, then you need the action to back that up. That's what's critical. So people say, I want to come volunteer, and you call them right away, and they volunteer for something, they tell 10 people, and it just keeps going that way.
Yeah, you really help people live it, it sounds like. Get right into it. Cool, thank you. The next question is, in the nearly 3 decades that you've been doing this, what are some of the greatest stories of impact on the lives of children?
Yeah. That's what's been so special about the last decade. 2 things. I got a letter, maybe this was 15 years ago, from a student who I had in my first year at North High School, who said, I didn't know until, it was a long letter, and basically she said, I didn't know until now the impact that Project Success had on my young life. And what I loved about her words were, she said, what led to my resilience that allowed me to achieve all the things I've achieved? It was about her achievement, but she talked about bringing her on her first college tour, bringing her to New York on a college tour, her first plane ride into JFK, and now she does work all over the world. Just incredible. That's just one story.
It's the bridge concept you're talking about, I think. Yeah.
It
wonderful.
is, and several parents have come up to me here at this breakfast and said, you had an impact on my child. There is nothing better than that.
It's amazing. And we'll end with a lighthearted one. So what's your favorite theater show or musical? We're all dying to know, right?
Oh, my favorite musical or show. Okay, I'm going to cheat, and I am going to do 2, because my favorite musical ever in the world is the first musical that our Project Success students wrote and sang and created and toured all over Mexico City. It was absolutely the most incredible musical experience ever. But I'm gonna have to go Hamilton, because it was that incredible.
Thank you.
Great questions.
Thank you, Kelsey. Really appreciate that.
Thank you,
well,
Kelsey.
you know what's coming. We've been asking the same question 80 times. And the question is, how do you know for sure that goodness pays for you in your leadership?
I'll tell the story that you
Thank you.
remembered, Paul. In the fall, we always offer transportation to everything. Really easy to say, very hard to do. We were just coming back into person. We couldn't find transportation, and we couldn't find drivers, and we wanted to make sure all staff felt comfortable, and we just didn't have enough. So we had vans. And in September, I said, I'll drive for the first month of the Institute at night. And I just love students. I love driving. And I love driving vans. And so I did this route for the first, I don't know why.
We just call it special.
I wanted a cap, but they didn't give me one. So I go and I have a route, and I pick up students. And one day I go to the school on day 1, and the student gets in back, and it's a high school student going to the Institute certificate program. And she looks at me in the mirror, and I'm driving. She's like, you knew? And I said, I'm actually old. She said, you're new, because I haven't seen you, and I do everything in Project Success. And I said, well, I'm new to driving. I used to drive a long time. So we got to chatting. Next day, I pick her up. She goes to all the certificates, and we got to know each other, and we shared music. And she was part of the cooking certificate. And, the questions are like, so are you married? I'm like, no. You're not? How old are you? So we did that route. And so on about the 3rd week of the cooking class, so they always cook an incredible meal, and they get to bring it home to their families. And the 3rd week, I'm driving her home, and she has her container of her meal, and she said, I'm giving you my meal tonight. It's not because you're not married. She said, I just appreciate you giving me rides and getting to know me, and I want you to have the meal I cooked tonight.
That's goodness right there.
Right there. And we have thousands of stories like that every day.
Mm-hmm. So I have one more question. We're making a bridge into the fall Good Leadership Breakfast when we're talking about future. So I want to know, from your perspective, why do you think we, the broader we, should be optimistic about our future?
Our kids, they have hopes and dreams, and through all the challenges, they are optimistic. The students I work with, the students I know, my nieces. And what's the opposite? What are we going to do? We have never had more challenges in some ways, and we get to read about it and see it in our face every single day. But there is that student I just told you about, that's why we're optimistic. Because connection and love, and we saw this when we were doing distant learning. We offered, when we canceled our global experiences, we offered a live stream safari on Saturday mornings for 2 hours, live from South Africa and Kenya. And we had hundreds of students join who didn't want to get off the phone. Never been a bigger challenge, unknown. And they were like, isn't this incredible? And one kid stayed on that call, Paul. They're like, it's over. We're on Zoom. And he's like, but we haven't seen an elephant yet. And my point is like, that the optimism. And we have to be there for each other and for our kids and our families to not ignore what is here, but to have faith and hope so that we can make a better community and a better day.
Well, it's obvious to us why so many people think you're a good leader. Thank you so much.
It's an
We're
honor
so
to
happy.
be here. And thank you all. Thank you for being
Come
here.
on up, JC.
Thanks, Adrienne.
Thank you.
So we'll be donating $1,000 to Project Success today as well. And I think maybe we often wonder, it's like when we donate money, like where and what and how. So like, where is this $1,000 going to help Project Success? What project or where will it go?
So it's really fun because you were saying, where do we want to put that $1,000? And I was telling you about our certificate programs. And we have such a waiting list for some of our programs. And we want to add certificates in this coming year. So it is that $1,000 will help us add one new certificate in this coming school year ahead of us. So we're really excited about it.
Fantastic.
Cool. So great. And now we get to see what happens when a room full of people who don't know each other yet come together and what impact that has. You've raised $1,943 within your donations today. And then with Mark's doubling of that, $3,886 will be given away to a charity of your choice. Adrienne, will you do the honors? And we'll have you come on up. So start thinking, where are you going to be giving this money to?
Alicia Rydell.
Where's Alicia?
Yeah. The shortest walk ever. Awesome. Come on up, Alicia.
And that is the first time somebody in the front row has ever won. Come on, here you go.
Alicia, come on over and share who you are, where you're from,
Yeah, nice to meet
and where you're going to be giving the money to.
I'm Alicia Rito, and I work with Mercer. And actually, Project Success, because I was just telling my table that I volunteered for Project Success for a long time for a couple of reasons. I love kids, and two, I couldn't afford to go to shows myself because I was a very young mom with no money. And so I would often go pick up these kids, and their family was supposed to come with them, and their family wouldn't show up, or we'd have an empty seat, so it would just be myself and the other person. And it was such a rewarding experience, and I was saying at the table that I had never heard you talk about where the inspiration came from for the organization, and it really just, I don't know, clicked in my head, like, that is amazing, and it's exactly what I experienced, so thank you.
You're welcome.
Fantastic. Awesome.
That's amazing.
So as we head back into the office, let's remember the success habits we got from Adrienne. Number 1, spend time creating a culture of encouragement. I love that she said, because the opposite is not good. Yeah, that was profound, wasn't it? Yes. Ensure everybody has a personal connection to the mission. One of my dear friends, Shadi Alamar, is in banking, and he's like, banking's not fun. Well, you got to make it fun, okay? Okay? And then this idea of intentional cause and effect change management. We could do an entire program just on that, but the challenge to you is to make sure that you do something with that information. So I'm going to close with a story, a prediction, and a challenge. So the story is about me. About 2 months ago, I had a birthday, and I turned 59. And looking at 60 is interesting. I have mentors in my life, many of them, but I have 3 who are roughly 20 years older than me, and they're still working. Now, mind you, I have guys I play golf with who are retired, and they're my age or younger. That life does not appeal to me. What I've learned from my mentors is that if you love your work and you're making a difference, why quit? Especially if it's adding to the fun in your 7F's wheel. But I've also learned that you have to take time off. So in about 10 days, Melinda and I are heading to Europe for a month. I'm going to do a sabbatical again. This will be my second one since we started the firm. And I'm going to spend some time thinking about what do I want the next 20 years to actually look like in my life? Not what do I have to do, but what do I want to do? So that 20 years from now, I might still be standing on this stage. It's a fascinating thing to think about what's going to happen this fall. So if you've been following along with the Good Leadership Breakfast, we didn't actually intend for this to go on past one meeting. And that was in January of 2010. So here we are. In September, it'll be our 98th, then 99th, then 100th breakfast. And so for me, it's obvious that we need to be talking about the future. We're going to dedicate the entire series to this idea. Why should we be optimistic about our future? And we're going to go back to these really powerful people. We're going to start with Pete Bevacqua. To understand who Pete is, he runs NBC Sports, and NBC Sports owns all the media rights in the Western world for the Olympics. So Pete is not really in sports and entertainment. He's in geopolitics and global affairs. And I'm going to ask him, he's seen it. That's just the things he saw trying to produce the Olympics this year in China. I'm going to ask him, why do you think we should be optimistic about our future? And then with the law of contrast, we're going to talk to Lisa Wright. She's a client of our firm. She lives in Houston, and she runs the largest low-income health plan in the state of Texas. They serve the poorest of the poor and the most vulnerable in Texas. And I'm going to ask her, through her lens, why should we feel optimistic about our future? And then, I don't even know who's going to be the speaker at the 100th breakfast yet. If I knew, I would tell you. And as soon as I figure it out, I'll tell you. But we're going to ask that person the same thing. And what's going to be special about that is that we're inviting every past speaker back to the breakfast. We're going to fill the floor here with people who've been speakers. There are several of you in the room, there. Thank you. It'll be fun to see you then. My prediction is we're going to rock your world a little bit because we're going to focus really hard on the future F in the 7F's wheel. And the coaching question that's not always so nice and sunny is, if you don't have a 9 or a 10 on future, why would anyone follow you? And I've been doing this a long time, and I've seen maybe 100,000 7F's wheel. And I can tell you, we don't see very many 9s or 10s on anything. So one of the things we're going to do to help you is we're sending you home today with this. Everyone here gets a copy of the bucket list book. And the reason we're doing this is because the bucket list is an aspirational concept. It forces you to think about, what are my aspirations? What do I want to get done? And the reason I started Good Leadership, we were just talking about this, is my co-author of this book, the guy that invented the handy paint pail, he told me I looked miserable in May of 2009 and said, come on, I've known you always wanted to start your business, let's do it. Just like the eagle, he took me and threw me out of the nest. And look where we're at right now. The world needs you to have a bucket list. The world needs you to have aspirations. The world needs you to have a 9 or a 10 on future. So when we come back, the challenge is, I want you to come back in this room in September when we meet Pete Bevacqua with a 9 or a 10 on future. Can you do it? Yeah. So we close with this idea that The highest compliment for any good leader is you radiate goodness. So I'm just going to ask you to yell it out one time today. So are you ready to radiate goodness today? Yes. We will see you in September. Thank you.